The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the producers and the individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the staff of the Sun Prairie Media Center, its members or underwriters, the board members of the Media Center Commission, Charter Communications, TDS Telecom, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hi, this is John Quinlan, and welcome to Forward Forum. We've been on hiatus for a little while, but we're looking forward to plunging right back in and doing a bunch of shows. Just a preview, coming up in mid-July, we have two very interesting shows. Paul Esser, the mayor of Sun Prairie, will be joining us on the day after the first anniversary of the tragic explosion here, talking about kind of where things have come since then, how the community, the region have pulled together. Should be a very interesting and inspiring show. And then following that, we're going to be talking about the 50th anniversary of the moon landing with Ed Churchwell from the an emeritus professor at the UW Astronomy Department. So that's probably it for the summer, and then the fall we'll get going with regular shows again. But today, I'm just especially excited, and I am really pleased to be joined by my co-host and a guest, kind of assuming both roles, Wanda Smith. Many of you know Wanda from our experiment in radio, which I think we're going to be re-embarking on again, called Community Conversations. And Wanda is a community activist, also a counselor who deals with trauma issues, and a former candidate for the city council in Fitchburg. Wanda, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So housing is an issue that you have maybe just a little bit of passion and experience around, right?
Oh, yeah. Personally.
That's right.
So I'm excited to be here to talk about it.
Oh, it's great to have you here. And also, two of my favorite people in the world, two tenants' rights advocates extraordinaire. On the left, we have Brenda Konkel, and many of you know Brenda from her long experiences at the Tenant Resource Center over the years. And just in full disclosure, that's a job I had in the mid-'80s for a few years. And we were struggling. We had 1.5 employees. We were dealing with the fall of the Madison Tenant Union and kind of taking things on. But within a few years after I left that job, Brenda had come on board as staff and then executive director now, and created an agency with just all kinds of services and capabilities and employees. And so for a lot of reasons, Brenda's somebody I have a lot of admiration for. She left that position about a year ago, is looking for new prospects now. But Brenda, hey, welcome to Forward Forum.
Thank you. Thank you.
Brenda, also a former city council person and for a time a candidate for mayor. And also joined by Heidi Wegleitner. Heidi's day job is at Legal Action Wisconsin as an attorney, and she is on leave from that position, and also someone who wears a number of different hats in terms of different committees, and Heidi's also a county board supervisor. So welcome, Heidi.
Thanks.
So I warned you, I think we'll get started the way we do with a lot of our guests, and we'll start with Brenda if we could, but you know, I in a minute we're gonna play a few excerpts from an interview I did with Satya Rose Conway, the new mayor of Madison. One of the things we both remarked on is, why is it that when you assess city priorities or any government priorities, housing tends to be like number 15 or 16 way down the list, when it ought to be number 1 or 2 at least. But I'm just curious, what got you involved back when in issues of housing? You were an attorney working on these issues. Of course, TRC, brought all that home. But why do you think housing is so important?
Well, how I got involved was I had a housing problem, right? And so I went to the tenant. I was in law school at the time, and the person sitting next to me happened to be the volunteer coordinator at the Tenant Resource Center. And I started asking her questions, and she said, "Hey, you should volunteer for us." Oh. And I started volunteering at the Tenant Resource Center, and made my little problem seem really silly, right? Mm-hmm. After hearing, I was living in an apartment that wasn't supposed to be charging us for things they were charging us for, but when I was in law school, I had no money, but it just wasn't like, I didn't have cockroaches, and I didn't have all the other things that other people started coming in and talking about. Yeah. And at that time, you're right, the Tenant Resource Center was just that 1.25 people and a bunch of volunteers, and the door wasn't always open, and there was a lot of issues going on, and I just sort of got involved and just started hearing the stories and became the volunteer coordinator and got on the board of directors, and eventually became the executive director, and just have been going along with it. But when you hear the stories all day long, every day for 23 years or 28 years, you can't help but see that there's a problem that needs to be resolved. And I do think I've seen it change over the years.
Yeah.
The alders, when they have their retreat and they talk about what the big issues are, housing's always in the top three.
Okay, good.
Affordable housing has really bumped up in priority. When you think about when Mayor Dave ran the first time, everything was about affordable housing, but then what did he do, right?
Yeah.
Satya ran, said it was a priority. Is she going to do anything? It seems like people say it during election time, but do they actually do anything once they get elected?
Is it because it's so complicated, essentially, or?
I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of elected officials, they want to do something, they just don't know what to do.
Right.
It's kind of like we need people who can provide them with answers. I have a feeling, if there's a vote and it says here, if you vote for this, we'll have more affordable housing. I think you have lots of votes. But coming up with the ideas and forwarding whatever the initiative is going to be, I think that's a little bit harder for people because it is complex, and you have a lot of people telling you lots of different things that seem to conflict with each other, and there's not a lot of real experts in this area.
Yeah.
And so I think it's hard for the alders, and we'll see once what the mayor does. But
We'll go into this level of detail later,
Sure.
but you're talking about Dave Cheslevich and initially wanting to do something, inclusionary zoning, where for every basically upscale unit of housing, an affordable unit would be constructed. That was struck down as unconstitutional. We have a very archaic constitution at some level at the state of Wisconsin. But efforts at rent control and other things are stymied, and then at some point the Republicans pulled the city's ability to enact tenant ordinances that were stronger than the state's. So where do those impediments figure in? I mean, in some ways the city of Madison's hands are tied, or at least that's the excuse.
yeah, I think we need I think we need a overall housing strategy. When we talk about affordable housing, we have to be looking at everybody's needs in our community. And I think that sometimes our affordable housing strategies focus maybe on one population. Right now, we tend to focus a lot on people who make 60 to 80% of county median income, which is $100,000 for a family of four, right? So that's not really affordable housing. And I think we really need to look at all of our housing strategies and try to make sure that we're hitting the lower levels of income. What about people who are on W-2, on Social Security, are making just the minimum wage? What is the affordable housing for those folks? And so I think sometimes we get all mixed up in our conversations about affordable housing. But inclusionary zoning did work for home ownership. It just didn't work for rental. And that was because of the state constitution. But I think, we really need to be looking at how can we have a broad range of strategies for people at all the different income levels instead of just at 60 to 80% AMI. And it's been a struggle for the last 20 years to get people to get out of that range when they build affordable housing. How can we get them down to 50% of AMI or 30% of AMI?
The only caveat I would put on that is, obviously, very often people with limited incomes, get short shrift. But in terms of home ownership, as you know, I went through what essentially was an unjust foreclosure process. I won't go into details here, but there are a lot of people who've lost their homes, or, for example, the elderly resident off of Willie Street, where the property taxes have got out of control, so they don't know if they're going to be able to stay in their home. So it really is across the board, and I think that's, in some sense, that's good in terms of us all working together because we all have a stake in it. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, and also home ownership. Because I've worked with renters for so long, I've
Sure.
always focused on renters. But home ownership is a way, out of poverty. If you can build that equity in your home, it's the way your family builds equity, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it is an important strategy. And we don't have a lot of starter homes or condos that are affordable for people, at a reasonable amount of money. That, if we could get people into home ownership in a condo and they could start building equity instead of paying rent, they could pay the same for their mortgage as what they're paying for their rent, and they could start building up that equity. And I think that that's a real strategy that we have to take a serious look at in our community, because that's how I grew up in a poor family. That's how I built the equity that I have. That's my retirement account essentially, right? So, I think it's a really important strategy, but we don't talk about it a lot.
Okay. Well, Heidi, same thing just in terms of the path that brought you here, but maybe the extra dimension you can add. I actually caught myself talking about this problem as a city of Madison problem. And we're sitting here in Sun Prairie, which is a little ironic, but it's certainly a countywide problem, challenge, as well as statewide. I mean, there's a bigger picture here. We also still have 2 housing authorities, so decisions about affordable housing often we don't necessarily, for example, in the town of Madison versus the city of Madison, there needs to be better coordination. There's opportunities as the town goes into the city, et cetera. But maybe you could address that bigger picture as a county supervisor, how we really need to coordinate among the cities and the other entities in the county.
I think that's a really good point. And I think it was in 2015, Kurt Paulson released a report, or maybe early 2016, about the housing needs assessment in Dane County, and it really shows by detail in each municipality what the gap is in terms of affordable housing. How many people actually need affordable housing, who are paying more than 30% of their income towards a housing payment, versus how many affordable units are actually available. And so there's gaps everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to get overwhelmed because we think, well, I'm not an expert and I do it too. I'm a tenants' rights attorney and an eviction defense lawyer. And so, I know that world really well of landlord-tenant law and eviction defense, and understand the experiences that my clients face when going through that process as best I can as their advocate. But I'm not a housing finance expert, for example, right? I'm not a realtor. But we can be overwhelmed with the problem, and that can lead to sort of inaction or thinking it's too hard for us to tackle. And so we have to be really cautious about that. And one thing that the county has done in the last 5 years, and the city has a similar initiative, is to actually just invest resources into the building construction of affordable housing. Yeah. We're saying this is a priority. This is a problem. We're identifying it as a priority. So we are going to have a fund to support and make it more possible for developers to develop low-income housing. And so that fund is available to developers pursuing projects all over the county, and a certain portion of that needs to be made available outside the city of Madison. So one thing we can do is just recognize the problem for what it is, invest resources, prioritize our money in our capital budget, not just our capital budget though, because we do, depending on the project, you might need some operating money to go towards rent subsidies if it's a rental housing project, or supportive services, case management, if folks in the project have maybe histories and traumas that they'll want some additional support to stabilize in that housing. But dedicating the resources, recognizing it as a problem is a really important first step. Yeah. And it's resulted in the creation of a number of units. And another thing we can do with that funding is really set our priorities in terms of what we want these projects to do. For example, we want to make sure these projects are not discriminating in their applications process. We want to make sure these projects, these landlords are advising and informing tenants of their rights, and they're not exploiting or abusing and taking advantage of tenants, because we have certainly as a county have an interest in having a more balanced power dynamic between landlords and tenants. So when we make that investment and we say, hey, we want to support you in developing housing, but we want to make sure you're not taking advantage of people. We want to make sure you're not discriminating against people. That's something that I've been working a lot on over the last couple of years, and I'm excited to say that we've actually doubled in the 2019 budget. We doubled our affordable housing fund from $3 million to $6 million. Now that's a tiny amount compared to the need, but it's significant, and it shows that there is that political will to do something.
just to market, I know, Wanda, you'll have some questions, I think, about that particular funding pot and how it's going to be used. But just to finish off a couple of things. Anyway, just mentioned Brenda, who grew up in a rural area outside of Wisconsin Dells, as you mentioned, from a family that was economically challenged. And so obviously that's part of your motivation, your empathy. Out of curiosity, so you grew up in Hudson, and did you have an awareness early on about sort of the importance of housing? And your career has gravitated toward helping people that are severely economic challenged to be a client of legal action, have to have a pretty limited income and resources. You work with an eviction program, which of course are people in crisis. How did you gravitate toward people who had those kind of extreme needs?
Thanks for that question. So through kindergarten, my family lived in a Section 8 project.
Oh.
And so my parents were both in college. They had me very young. They, came from middle class families, had a lot of family support, and were able to get into low-income housing basically right away when my mom got pregnant, and that allowed them to save some money, finish school, and eventually then buy their, home, the home I grew up in.
So this is an era when there wasn't a perpetual waiting list, right?
Right, and so, it wasn't long after that, basically in the next presidential administration, when I was, luckily living in this
Carter
housing.
To Reagan, or?
Carter to Reagan,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
So they moved in during Carter, and we lived there in Reagan's, first term, and then, Reagan just slashed the federal housing budget, which, all of a sudden now, instead of people just being able to apply and get into housing they can afford, now we have these, years-long wait lists, closed wait lists, and we just have never recovered. The resources have never been put back into the federal budget, and that's created so many problems.
Just a quick aside, for people who don't know, Section 8 allows people to have their rent determined, so it's roughly a third of their income. And if their circumstances change, their rent will go up or down. But it's a wonderfully simple and straightforward solution to make housing affordable.
Right. Yeah. So, and I think then, for most of the rest of my life, I took the stable housing that I had for granted. I didn't really think about it much growing up in Hudson. I grew up in the country. We ran around, did kind of whatever we wanted, it felt like. And then, and I went to law school, and then I got a job as a civil legal aid attorney representing tenants in subsidized housing issues and in evictions. And obviously then housing insecurity became very front and center to my work, to what I was doing every day. And it got me involved and in contact with Brenda and the Affordable Housing Action Alliance, and really, I guess, also led me to get involved in local politics.
And having a cool son like Lincoln is going to propel you to greatness too. Imagine,
Thank you. Yes.
So much fun watching him at Bobfest a few years ago, if you remember. Yeah. Well, let's go to the other side here to Wanda. So the three of you served together on, actually, Brenda, what's the name of the group? The Housing Resource Consortium?
Homeless Services
Homeless
Consortium.
Services Consortium, okay. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But one of the things that you had offered to do is to kind of put a personal frame on this, because your family has been in crisis, both your immediate family, your own situation, and your grown children have also faced some different challenges. I'm trying to think where the best place to start is, but that's not an unusual situation. In fact, you're constantly getting calls from people who are asking for your insights into your help and dealing with these really difficult systems. Heidi was alluding to, I think, this discrimination is a factor, that we've got to build systems where the application process is fair, and if you're on limited income, you're not going to have a sterling credit rating all the time, or some of the other things that seem to be bottom lines. So, what are your thoughts? What has driven you to be an advocate for affordable housing?
I don't know. I'm gonna share a couple awards here. This was an award that I received from the Capital City Hughes, and it says 2017 Fabric of the Hood Award. we congratulate Wanda Smith for her work in the Madison area, challenged neighborhoods, and holding those neighborhoods together as a community.
Okay.
That's my life. That's what I live for.
Let's get some photos of these after you leave, and maybe we'll
Okay.
get close up on them. But yeah.
Now, you remember this award? So, the David Austin Memorial Award was an award that I received from Heidi and Brenda with the Progressive Dane. Former Progressive Dane co-chair in elections, co-chair David Austin dedicated his personal and professional energy to building a better community for all. The David Austin Memorial Award is presented for a commitment and work toward creating a just and fair society through progressive public policy and electoral efforts that bring new ideas and new people into the local conversation. So I was honored to receive this from Progressive Dane, and Brenda and Heidi was part of that.
Progressive Dane is a coalition to elect progressive people to local office.
Yep. And so I just thought I'd share that with them because
Absolutely.
I believe we're in this fight together, but I think that my fight becomes personal because I'm the target. And so it's a difference in being homeless and white and being black and homeless.
So actually, let me zero in on something. We can come back with some of these broader questions. So what we've been talking about a lot is you've been seeking out advice, and you've been doing a bunch of organizing around the idea of a black student tenant union. And I want to go back and forth on that a little bit in terms of the emphasis, how it fits into a bigger picture of different advocacy and things. But what's your motivation for a black student tenant union?
Well, the Black Tenant Union is
Not student tenant, excuse me, black tenant union.
no, a Black Tenant Union is imperative in this day and age because we're the ones that are affected by the crisis, right? And so there's a great racial disparity here in Madison, across the state. In housing is a big one. And I think that black tenants are being denied for or getting non-renewals for anything. And it's good that we have an eviction prevention thing in place, but folks are still getting evicted like every month.
Yeah.
In spite of, all the money put into eviction court and all of the advocacy, people are still being put on the street.
Is it more likely perhaps that, again, taking your own situations, into account, that maybe it's easier to be labeled as a troublemaker because it just becomes a vicious cycle. If someone is singling you out or making assumptions about you based on racial stereotypes or other things, then when you complain about the inequitable treatment, then suddenly you're the one who is totally unreasonable and can't be dealt with, and gosh, we don't necessarily want to keep you around. Is that the kind of thing that happens?
Yeah, and I think that's what happens when we as tenants, we speak up for our rights and we say, the last place that I got evicted from was, and I never should have got evicted, was because my 12-year-old granddaughter was fighting with some other kids, and my daughter was at work and I was babysitting, and this was something that happened across the street, and it was really an injustice. And I moved in December, and I got the non-renewal notice in February. In February, they said, we're not going to renew your lease because the police was called, and police decreases the value of the property. I'm like, police are here every day. And they're with white, and they were here with white clients too. I've seen arrested and escorted out, but they still have their housing. So I set out, to piggyback off of that is the fact that, so I got evicted. My daughter got evicted. Well, it was a non-renewal, but we decided it was a storm. December the 31st, we wasn't able to move out. And now the law changed that you don't have to go back to court. So that Friday when we didn't move out, they filed for an eviction. And then that Monday, I had a notice saying that the sheriff was going to put me out. I said, this is insane. That this was an injustice.
And one of these issues is I don't know if this was that situation, but they had towed your car.
This was the same unit that was they were targeting people's cars, and I was bringing awareness. I'd have my camera out, and my car got towed for nothing. And the good thing about it, I had took a picture of my car in the parking stall, and they returned my car, and the guy out, and they towed it all the way to Wanakee, which is heartless. They towed your car all the way to Wanakee. And instead of giving you a ticket without notice, people were visiting their loved ones, and their cars was just, I seen so much heartbreak. But I said all that to say is that I think that something immediate could be done, and that's why we're creating this Black Tenant Union. Is because it's not. We know that blacks are going to be we're the most target, right? Yeah. But it's for tenants, for all tenants who are who have no rights.
So even though you feel strongly about this, and you've experienced landlords who are going to put you in a box, they're going to say, I once had a problem with somebody like you, and so I'm not going to let you get away with this, or I'm not going to do this again, or all the stuff that goes into treating somebody in a different way because of all kinds of different characteristics. It could be race, it could be disability, it could be a number of things. And I know in your own family you've had to deal with all of that.
Right.
But I just wanted to say, though, despite all of that, you were telling me the other day, you think one of the solutions is to get tenants and landlords into the same room and to learn from each other.
I agree. I think that the housing crisis, the big picture, is going to take time. Okay. Right. I think that we can have some things in place now where people can feel, because everybody is on eggshells, like especially Black people. They don't know when their lease is going to be, when they're going to get kicked out. They're getting evicted for just any little thing, and because there's no tenant rights, right? And so what we want to do is organize so that we can start showing up, we're going to start standing on the streets. We're going to start making some noise and let these landlords know we are tired of living in your high-priced projects. You're not doing what you need to do. My apartment was infested with mice and roaches.
And then that apartment, that building collapsed not long after you left.
My same apartment that I lived in, the ceiling where my bedroom was collapsed. And so it tells me that, God sees all things. There's a God of the atmosphere that moves. And so long as I know that I'm doing things for humanity and for the love of God and the love of people.
But I just want to punctuate, despite the fact that someone was willing to put you in a box and discriminate against you, you're not going to go out and say all landlords are bad. You really want to.
No.
The idea that if people could understand the challenges that folks face in terms of housing, if they could get to know people, maybe that's part of the solution.
I think that, now don't get me wrong, some people have messed it up for those that trying to do good.
Sure.
And that's in every culture. And so the thing about it is that...
So you come to the table and you say, hey, I understand.
I understand.
There are those incidents that maybe cause you to be jaded and not want to, but that's not everybody.
That's not everybody. And so a landlord has a bad experience with one tenant, and it becomes the whole Black community, or it becomes the whole Latino community, or it becomes whatever. And so the thing about it is, so I'm going to show up at one of their meetings and just say, hey, what is your fear? How can we help you? If we get liaisons working in the communities with these landlords, these management companies, with these families, hold them accountable, then there could be some sustainability here.
I'm going to keep going around the table. We'll come back and feel free to interject again. You're co-interviewer too, if there's something I'm missing.
No.
Please help. I want to come back to Brenda for just a second. Just make the observation. We won't go into any other dark places here, but I've just observed one of my frustrations as somebody who is an admirer of you is you sometimes get put in boxes that you don't belong in. And one of the things I've been most impressed with if I've seen you in action is actually you do have good relationships. A lot of what the Tenant Resource Center did was to work with small landlords, produce training materials, a landlord training book, and do other things. And it's not a matter of you putting everybody in a box either, and you trying to bring out the best in people. I mean, does that make sense in terms of an approach?
Yeah, we started a mediation program. We do trainings for landlords. Our theory at the Tenant Resource Center was that for every landlord that we teach to do things the right way, there's a whole bunch more tenants that won't be complaining, right? And then so indirectly we're helping tenants through helping the landlords make sure they get things right. And so we've always had sort of that attitude. Landlords are also, when they come into the office, are always like nervous or scared or like, they told me I could come here, but I'm not sure if I'm in the right place. And we always try to make them feel at home, make sure that they, they feel free to ask the questions.
You don't squirt them with a squirt gun or have things fall down from the ceiling or any of that.
Much rather,
nets,
much rather give them the right answers and make sure that the tenants are getting treated properly. So, people don't know what to think. It takes a little while to build those relationships, but it's possible. doesn't. I think building those relationships, sort of creates a foundation. But then you get to the point where you're back at like we don't agree. There's just things
Right.
that we fundamentally don't agree on. But I think as long as you respect that and have that open dialogue, it's very helpful.
35 years ago, I was the chair of the Equal Opportunities Commission Housing Committee. And that was this place where we sat across the table and we tried to find common ground. Sometimes it was something simple like doing a recycling brochure, that we both had an interest in making work or other things. But sometimes it was just hearing each other out. And I'm not sure there are opportunities like that right now.
No, I think when they started redoing the housing committees, Mayor Bauman, I think, was the one who sort of started separating us from each other and not giving us those community forums as much as what we had in the past.
Yeah.
We still continued to meet with the apartment association like on a monthly basis
Really?
with them for a couple years, still talking about whatever issues were coming up. But in 2011, when they just went straight to the legislature and started changing all the laws, that's when everything completely broke down. Because they just, it was our Madison landlords, make no mistake, it was our apartment association that lobbied the legislators to change the tenant landlord laws.
Yeah, I think it ebbs and flows. But the other reality is, with a minuscule vacancy rate, what incentive do they have to come to the table?
Exactly.
Is that a lot of it?
Yeah. We were talking with them most when they had 14% vacancy rates.
Oh,
and
really?
That seems unheard of now, but now when it's around 2 or 3.
So in theory, the market should dictate that they would treat people fairly, but when it's a done deal that they're going to rent their apartments, maybe not so much.
Right.
Sometimes,
exactly.
yeah. Heidi, do you have any thoughts on this? So in the eviction programs you work in, you've seen that in action. Part of it is hoping that landlord on the other end will cut a deal, will be reasonable. I guess in some of your interactions, you maybe because you're an attorney and you're dealing with situations that have gone ways. But do you have some thoughts on it too? Is it possible to work with landlords and realtors, maybe find some common ground here?
Well, I will say we always win when they're unreasonable.
That's true too.
So, I think, my job and my work with pro bono lawyers that sign up to help provide representation at eviction court is to figure out what the facts are of the case, figure out what protections or defenses the tenants may have, and certainly those have been reduced as the law has changed. And then, figure out what the goal of our clients are in terms of keeping their housing, moving, working out a deal, not working out a deal, and then approach the other side with our position. And so that involves a lot of communication, a lot of kind of understanding of perspective, and even if there's often really a breakdown in that landlord-tenant relationship. Sometimes it's been kind of similar to like a divorce. Like there's a lot of strong feelings. Our goal is to figure out, okay, can we settle this and avoid the unpredictable result of trial, which could mean landlord's case gets dismissed, they can start all over again, or maybe they can't, or the tenant gets evicted, and trial can be predictable. Now, when I think we're very likely to win at trial, we present a really strong offer and position based on my evaluation of the case. And if a landlord says, I don't care, I just don't like him so much, I want him out no matter what, that's usually when we do very well at trial. So.
I guess one other silver lining part, that I saw the day that, full disclosure, I faced this situation with the landlord that I ended up falling out with, was that the attorney for the other side was actually trying to find some middle ground, be relatively reasonable. So sometimes just because attorneys deal with a more defined framework, and really it is in the best interest of their clients, they realize to come to some kind of a settlement. Sometimes that works in your favor, is that right? Sometimes.
I do think having attorneys involved in the court process is better for the courts and usually better for the litigants. Now, because the
So, I mean,
attorneys
using
don't
the
have
ver-
as much of an
Right.
invested emotional interest and can be helpful in facilitating that resolution.
Using the divorce analogy, it would be disastrous if a husband and a wife that weren't, or a husband and a husband, or a wife and a wife that weren't getting along, just sort of, went at each other. So sometimes attorneys can help, I guess.
That said, they still have a duty. The landlord's lawyer still has a duty to represent
serve his
their
clients.
client.
Right.
So the client decides, and sometimes I do though have to push those lawyers to say, you need to ask your client. Don't you didn't ask them that today. This is our offer today. Go ask your client, because sometimes they'll just say I can't do that. I'm like, well, try ask them.
So the other impression I had that day, and I think you both contributed to this in terms of what's changed in 35 years, is just the fact that you were there in the courts. You were respected as a presence. I think the court commissioners and the other people that deal with things, I think more often than not, 35 years ago, would have taken the landlord's side, would have gone with the power and the prestige that comes with a landlord relative to a tenant. And I think you've given cred to the notion that the people you represent deserve a voice there too. Does that make sense? Are you proud of the fact that you have such a tangible presence in those settings?
I think it's good to have, because the other thing that I'm hoping all our lawyers are doing is presenting, and I help them do this, presenting the relevant facts for the court, so the court and the relevant law, so the court can make a efficient and fair decision. Because sometimes if the parties themselves aren't sure what the court, because they haven't been to law school, or because they're really overwhelmed and stressed out because of this really difficult situation they're in, the court may make a decision that isn't the right decision because they haven't been presented with the right facts or the right law. And so the judges I've spoken with really appreciate having our project there and our attorneys getting them the right information. And they don't like the judges in Dane County, I've heard from multiple judges, they don't like evicting people. And so if they actually get a good reason supported in the facts and the law not to evict someone, we're gonna get a dismissal. And I've been fortunate to just be practicing in Dane County the last year and a half, and I'm not commenting on every 70, on all the 72 counties. But in Dane County, I think that is the case, and I'm not sure if that was all the case. I've only been practicing for 13 years, but it is a positive development, and I think they really see the value of. And they're learning the law, because we're saying, look at this statute, Judge. This says that the landlord can't do that. This says the notice was bad and the tenancy wasn't terminated, and therefore you must dismiss this eviction action. They're like, oh, well, I've never read that before. That's important,
We're a little bit past the halfway mark. I just
okay.
wanted to let you guys know this. And just for anyone who's joining us midstream here, this is Forward Forum, and we're talking about tenants' rights, affordable housing, homeless issues, a whole variety of issues. And our guests are Wanda Smith, Brenda Konkel, and Heidi Wegleitner. I'll let you interject a question here, but just to tell you where I'd like to go with, we're actually more than halfway through. It always goes fast. But I'd like to sort of, think in terms of what we have now and how it could be made better, or what models there are in other places. And maybe because I have this longer history, things that used to be around, like a very active Fair Housing Council, or if you go way back, a very active tenant union that existed side by side with services like what Brenda and Heidi provide. But go ahead, what questions do you have?
I just had a question about eviction court, because I think most of the tenants that are getting evicted in eviction court are Black people, and the majority. So that's where the biggest problem is too, why we feel it's imperative as far as the Black tenant union, because most of these attorneys, it's a lot of racist attorneys that don't care about evicting people, a lot of them. And so representing their client in the best interest of the client, right? So the thing about it is, I think there needs to be more diversity in the eviction court, because there is none. And it's people who it's not an urgency.
I've heard this from you, and I'm curious to hear what Brenda and Heidi say, and this is speculation. But my sense is it's gotten especially bad the last few years, maybe as the vacancy rate especially was getting there. I mean, I know this from the landlady who took me to eviction court, who coincidentally was on a certain board at some point, but we won't go too deeply into that. But so this is someone who essentially said, I have no choice but to pursue this. And as I asked her more about it in previous conversations, it was sort of, this is the prevailing wisdom among landlords right now, that we're really going to vigorously pursue evictions. Evictions somehow as a remedy for the relatively small number of tenants that are misbehaving or doing other things, but that there's something wrong, maybe even basing it in fair housing law. We essentially have to treat everybody badly equally, I think was kind of the thesis. But I mean, you know, was there sort of this, has been this swell of this notion that eviction is somehow some kind of a reasonable solution, and you should, you know, the landlord should pursue it. I don't know. Do you get a sense that things have changed maybe a little bit?
What? Oh, go ahead.
No, sure.
I think that's been a problem all along. And
Okay.
it seems like no matter how many times you explain to landlords fair housing laws and how they work,
Right.
They still think they have to treat everybody equally poorly.
Right.
And you know, not understanding that, you know, you can still give people options as long as you give
Right.
everybody all the same options.
The difference between
right?
equality and equity.
Yeah.
Equity basically means understanding that everybody's different, and fairness, you don't have to, you know, discriminate against one person against another, but you can still adapt something to their situation. Does that kind of make
Right.
sense?
Yeah. I mean, like in the eviction case, you could say, here's you know, if you're going to do a payment plan, you got to offer a payment plan to everybody.
Right.
If you're going to say, hey, if you move out by the end of the week, offer everybody to move out by the end of the week before you file the eviction. Just, you know, it's not, you treat everybody the same, but you can treat them well too, right? And I think sometimes they just like see a solution in the law as the only solution, and can't think outside the box and think about, why not just, you know, why save all those, you know, you can save the attorney's fees, the filing fees, all of those things by just cutting a deal, and landlords don't think that way.
So
to some
thanks
extent.
to the people in this room, I think things have gotten better in some ways in 35 years, but I look at some of the things that aren't around. So I mentioned the EOC Housing Committee, you know, which did some good work, and it was also part of a wider, more focused approach to housing on the part of the Equal Opportunities Commission. There was a very viable Fair Housing Council with several employees active testing housing discrimination. So we send a black tenant and a white tenant out by way of example, or other protected classes. And you know, you probably know this, but people by and large, a landlord's not gonna not use racial epithets or blatantly discriminate against you. As a matter of fact, you know, probably in their mind they aren't discriminating, but they're gonna charge a different rent, treat you differently in ways that, unless you compare how they treat white tenants, you don't get at that. And while there is an office that's kind of a satellite of the Milwaukee Fair Housing Council, it's not nearly what it used to be. And just the last thing to mention, you can kind of pick and choose, you know, menu of these things. But, you know, so when the Tenant Resource Center was started, I think about 1984, it existed side by side with a very active Madison Tenant Union, which ironically was funded by a foundation of the Catholic Church. And there was a change, and I think a $500,000 grant got pulled, and suddenly there wasn't a Madison Tenant Union. Tenant Resource Center was started so it could be a 501c3, get city funding, granting, things like that. But it was basic services. It wasn't necessarily the advocacy group that the tenant union had to do. So then over the years, first my predecessor Matt and I and others, we had to wear both hats. We had to do all this unpaid work to be advocates, and then that's part of what you ended up with. But you know, when Wanda talks about a black tenant union, again, we don't want to lose that singular focus. It's just as fair housing was disproportionately focused on African Americans who suffer. But I mean, Latinos suffer, people with disabilities, gay people, et cetera. Mental illness being a huge, you know, kind of untold story. I wish we could return to the day when we both had an active fair housing presence, but also a tenant union that was sort of a parallel track to a group like TRC or Legal Action, because we really want to have groups that are not afraid, in this case, to just be 100% for the tenant. I mean, Brenda, is that if you could design this dream scheme, is that something that might come out that way?
Definitely. I mean, I do think, like, over the years, EOC, the MEOC has been less active in the housing area. The Fair Housing Center has been less active in Madison, and
Have there been
there's no more student
have
tenant
there been pattern
union.
testing done any time recently? Do we know?
Not that I'm aware of.
Because I think it's gotten worse,
Yeah.
not better, since 1985.
Well, and I think with all the law changes, the landlords
Yeah.
feel a little more
Yep.
free to do
Yep,
whatever they want.
Yeah.
Some of the headlines in the paper around that was like, "There's no more local Madison laws." You know,
Yep.
they're still there. Tenants
Yep.
do still have rights.
Right.
It's just it's hard to figure it out anymore because it's all so convoluted with all those 6 different law changes. It makes it you
explain-
need an attorney to be able to figure anything out about what your rights are, depending upon when you signed your lease, when the action took place, when it just. They eroded so much and made it
Yeah.
so difficult and so convoluted that even it's hard for people to volunteer to be a housing counselor anymore at the Tenant Resource Center because you have to keep track of so many different things. It's
Sure.
just gotten.
I mean, what I used to have
difficult.
to do was to determine if somebody, especially with the town, it was so confusing. What side of the line you're on just was a huge difference in terms of the amount of protections you had. But now, and it was just basically kind of was understood. You lived in the city, then all the things we worked on, rent abatement and 24-hour notice instead of 12, and all these other distinctions really gave a lot more teeth to the ability to do things. And then we discovered, well, you're in the town, you don't have this, you don't have that. It was really disappointing. But now, again, the playing field is leveled. Everybody's being treated badly equally, all that stuff. I mean, what are you thinking, Heidi?
Well, I want to follow up on
Sure.
something you said and some point that Wanda made, which is we know from research and based on data in the Tenant Resource Center database and CCAP data on eviction filings and Dr. Revel Sims from the University of Wisconsin's report that the less white a neighborhood is in Dane County, particularly Madison, the higher the rate of eviction. So we know where there are eviction hotspots in Madison and in Dane County, and one of the hotspots is in Sun Prairie. And so in what Dr. Sims has called this phenomenon is these kind of micro housing economies of eviction. So they're actually their own little market. And we see these landlords using the eviction process to pile on fees and to gain the upper hand and really leverage, get more power over tenants.
So one of the big things that changed was in the city of Madison, you could only charge 1 month's rent for security deposit. That's changed now?
Yep.
So is that the fees you're talking about and earnest
Well,
money?
just that they,
I'm sorry.
whether it's because they want to non-renew a tenant or
Right.
because that, they don't need a disclose a reason to non-renew a tenant, they or because the person is maybe a little bit behind on rent, even though the tenant communicated that their check was coming a week late and they were going to pay. They'll file an eviction, even though the lease is up at the end of the month. They'll file an eviction early in that month because then they get the upper hand. Then they can try to say, we want $2,000 today, or we're going to trial on Friday. You're going to lose and be evicted. And so it's this leveraging of power, getting even more of an upper hand in the way they're using the eviction process. And that's why I feel really strongly that any way we can bring more fairness, more fight, more defense to those tenants, the better we're going to do and the better outcomes we're going to get. But absolutely, there needs to be that organizing and that power building in these neighborhoods in particular that are very susceptible to eviction, to balance that out. And I think we need to be creative about what those strategies look like, and they need to come, obviously from the folks, most impacted in living there.
So 35 years ago, I think it used to be that we thought of fair housing mostly as people were seeking housing, whether they got their housing or got turned down. Sounds like eviction, or just being turned down for a renewal. That's playing in more and more. So people are losing their housing, and that's one of the compelling things.
But
right
then if they have an eviction on CCAP, then they can
was
also not
CCAP?
get housing.
What's the acronym
CCAP is,
Yeah.
or the Wisconsin Circuit Court Access System, is a public
Okay. Oh,
website
right.
that unofficial court records that anyone can go on to look up their neighbor or boyfriend or whatever, and see anything that's been filed against them. So a lot of landlords use that, and employers use that to check on people who are applying.
So once you've been evicted, the record is there, and that's
Once a
they
case
can
has
use-
been filed.
Right.
So any case that's been filed, and the clerk's not checking to see if the case was retaliatory, if you even live there, if there's
Yeah.
any merit
Yeah.
whatsoever, and it can be very difficult to get it off.
Just to extract out of that. So retaliation is a defense. I mean, that's something someone could claim is happening, but it's not always easy to prove.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
And if you owe
I
anything,
just wanted
you
to
can't
piggyback
really.
off of that when
Yeah.
you said retaliation, because in my situation and my daughter's situation, we filed a civil rights complaint with the city of Madison. And whatever, they found no probable cause, so the city partnered with it. But the lawyer in my daughter's case, because it was her daughter, he wanted to settle for $100. I told him that's an insult to me. So I think that I'm just telling people to file complaints, because that just go file a discrimination complaint, whether you win or not, because that's going to bring awareness to what's happening.
And they've made the process so much easier. That's one thing I think the city of Madison has done a super great job. They now have a community partners program where they go out and they teach other people to help people file complaints at the EOC. They've simplified their forms. They've
Yep.
made everything so that you don't need an attorney, that you can just go in
Yep.
and they review the cases quickly.
Yep.
And so it is, I think that is a really great change. I'm not sure a lot of people know about it yet, so I'm
Yep.
glad you're telling people. I think more people need to talk about that, because I
Yeah.
think it's a significant change if people know to use it.
Right, but I think like the partnership is with the city though, because if the city is because the city is the one that's part of the vicious cycle, right? Because it's the EOC, it's the City of Madison Equal Rights Complaint, and so the city is saying this is okay. No, this is not fair. I mean, this is fair for them to treat you this way.
Well, one of the things I was trying to explain to you too is that the Equal Opportunities Commission can't be a tenant advocate. One of the reasons why it was great to have a Fair Housing Council is they could be there to say, yes, we're going to pursue your case, we're going to listen to your side of things, we're going to, but that makes it really complicated.
I know.
What you talked about, no probable cause.
Right.
By their notion, they have fairly talked to both sides and then they figured it out.
Right.
But coming back to whether it's a tenant union or Fair Housing Council, there are things missing.
Yep.
I think I've told you a model we wanted to pursue was a group called Housing Opportunities Made Equal out of Richmond, Virginia. I talked to, I think, Lisa Payton Kerr about this because that's her
Yeah.
hometown. First of all, they had like a dozen different landmark fair housing cases that went before the Supreme Court. So, what a rich tradition there. But not only did they do the Tenant Resource Center side of things, so they had a tenant union advocacy side, they had a homeownership side, and I'm trying to think anyway, but they proactively worked to create integrated neighborhoods. So they looked at parts of town that where there weren't opportunities for African Americans and other people, and they showed instead of these myths that, oh gosh, we've got to live separately, it'd be dangerous to have black people in our neighborhood. What a beautiful thing an integrated neighborhood is, where you have people living side by side. And just the last thing on that, the other pet peeve I have is in cities like Richmond and most cities across the country, a school board plays an active role because school segregation is perpetuated by housing segregation. So as great as the work that everybody in this room's done and everything else, it just seems like a long way to go.
And even at the Tenant Resource Center, I mean, we got punished because of my advocacy, right? We lost $90,000
Right.
a grant. And it was a year after year after year they kept trying to take the money away from us because we spoke.
Who's the they in this case?
Well,
The
that
city
was
council?
the county at that
County, okay.
point. But it was all these different actions by county board members trying to defund the funding that the Tenant Resource Center was getting, and I do think that it was because we were, because we spoke up and people on our staff in their own free time would talk about things in the community that made people uncomfortable.
Is some of that the phenomenon of denial that there are problems in this county, whether it's racial discrimination or all kinds of other things that I mean, it's a mixture of that and the powers that be, not feeling threatened or you're being too aggressive.
Yeah,
Really, why can't we all just get along? But
being challenged.
yeah,
Yeah, and again, like they want to be a part of the solution, but don't know what the solutions are, and then don't like being criticized. I think.
I believe we're down to our 5 minutes. So last 5 minutes. So go ahead.
Yeah,
What did you
I
wanna
think there are some immediate solutions, and we are organizing, and the mass is growing for this Black Tenant Union. I'm so grateful to be a part of it because it is so needed. But I think that there are some things that we could do, like right now, that we need to, for us, have conversations with these landlords and let them know that we're not. We have to understand the fear that they're having.
So conversations is partly to meet them part way, but also just to lay it on the line.
Yes.
We are here and we're not going away.
No, and the mass is really growing, and because it's a monstrosity of a mess.
So we must have a little more than 5 minutes because Mara hasn't come out yet. But
Okay.
the one subject I want to broach, and we'll have to continue this discussion after the show. We also have to have you all back because there's a lot more to talk about here. But when I've told you this, but I as much as I admire the notion of a Black tenant union and what that means in terms of addressing a specific community that clearly has out of proportion challenges, the coalition builder in me is concerned that if we have that singular focus, we lose the possibility that comes when Black people and Latino people, disabled people, Hmong people, and poor working class people, regardless of their race, come together. So my recommendation, as we've talked, is to maybe have that as sort of a caucus, a singular focus, but to have it alongside a larger group.
Yeah.
And someone like you as a community organizer who, as you pointed out, likes white people.
I love white people. My best friends are white.
You get pigeonholed sometimes as,
I get
what's going on?
pigeonholed
You're
as
making all this noise. Don't you like white people?
Yeah, people seem to think I hate white people. I love white people. My best friend is white. Most of my friends a majority of my friends are white.
We get along kind of,
Yes,
don't we?
yes,
Yeah, sure.
yes. So no. But the thing about it is my Black people are affected. And we know the data tells us, right? There's a great racial disparity overall. And so when I advocate, when I talk, I speak for the rights of Black people. That's the bottom line. Doesn't mean that I love, yeah. So.
I mean, you guys have any thought? You know what I'm getting at? I think you've got to have both, a focus on a specific group that has difficulties, but coalition is what it's all about. Does that make sense, Brenda?
It does, and I know that there's another group in town that's trying to start a tenant union as well. But tenant organizing is hard work.
Right.
It is. I mean, I applaud you, Wanda, because it is hard work. People are busy. They're just trying to pay their bills, take care of their kids, get food on the table, and then deal with all these other things. Right. It's a lot of people don't have time for it. They're overwhelmed by it, and so it is very, very hard work. But it's, I think, also work that definitely needs to be done in the community.
I'll just note that one of the reasons we have to have you back is I didn't get a chance to go over Satya's thoughts on housing. I would say that she established that this was one of two priorities, along with transit. And maybe we can just remark briefly on that. But I mean, transit is hooked together with housing.
Definitely.
If you can't live, for example, outside the circle of Greater Madison without having access to transportation. So that limits things. So there's anyways a bunch of things that tie together here. Why don't I give you each a chance just to kind of, again, maybe in this theme of if you could custom design and there weren't impediments, what would it look like? And what do we need to do as a top priority? I'll start with you, Wanda.
Top priority is to have housing stability for everybody, including people of color who are targeted, who the city and county, the state is benefiting from mass incarceration, eviction court. That is something that is an urgent need for the Black community. If we can get something in place now to ensure that, I think that is my goal right now.
Stability, sustainability. People shouldn't have to fear that they're going to lose their houses or they're not going to be able to find something.
That's right. And shouldn't get evicted just because the kid is running around in the hallway. It's just I hear, just like you, I get all the crisis calls as well.
Yeah.
Even though I've been affected by it personally, I take it to heart, but there are so many tenants who call me every day saying, they didn't renew my lease. And so the West Side they had meetings, they're organizing too. And so they're tired of the West Side, and they was the same company that put me out. And I was like, oh yeah.
So we're going to be doing radio TV together. So hold on to
Yes,
these thoughts.
yes.
We'll continue those questions. Heidi, your thoughts?
So, Dane County and the City of Madison have previously said that recognize housing as a human right. It really needs to be more than words on paper.
Right.
And one way I think one strategy in realizing housing as a human right is to make sure that everyone has the right to a lawyer when they're facing the loss of their housing. And so I'd like to see Madison and Dane County join with and follow the lead of other communities across the country, like New York City, San Francisco, Newark, New Jersey. There's a number of areas that have said, we believe that you should have the right to a lawyer if you're facing eviction or loss of your public housing. And so we're going to put money there. We're going to adopt an ordinance to make sure that's the case. And while we have a lot of work to do at our state level and federal level, if there are advocates on the ground that can help to protect and enforce the rights that exist for tenants, I think we'll be in a much better place.
Brenda, I'm going to let you comment wherever you want to go, but one of the aspects that we didn't talk about who you are and what you do is you do citizen journalism. You do blogs, you do video, you again, you fell in love with a studio like this one because of all the possibilities that are represented here. But how much of it is awareness and public education, getting people fired up, and essentially, what Wanda specializes in, giving people a voice who haven't had a voice.
Definitely. I mean, I think that, people need a venue to have that voice, though, too. And so I've been thinking a lot about housing court. So not just bringing fair housing complaints in that easy kind of quick kind of method, but other complaints about repairs and security deposit returns and those types of things, trying to have something like that. And also I've been thinking a lot about, we need a comprehensive housing plan for the city of Madison that addresses all of the different income levels, and we need to really include the community in that. And I think that does require a lot of education and outreach and things that nobody funds, right?
So you were an advocate for WYOU.
Oh, definitely.
Cable access and all the social media stuff.
WRT and community radio and the other stations. I think they're critically important. Is where people can have these types of conversations. Where people are driving in their car and they can listen to this and think about it a little bit and maybe join the tenant union later.
I know, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We're out of time for this time, but we will have you back. And this is exactly the conversation I wanted to have. So thank you. Really appreciate it. Wanda Smith, Brenda Konkel, Heidi Wegleitner. I'm John Quinlan for Forward Forum. Have a great week.